Yi Chong was absolutely terrorized. He changed the direction of his engine in panic and landed the F-58 harshly. Zeep. The white laser skimmed through the forehead of F-58 and created a bottomless-looking crater on the ground, steaming. The immense force made the F-58 land like a beast on 4 feet, to buffer the pressure produced due to sharp turning. And almost immediately after, the F-58 launched itself like a jaguar into the crowd. Yi Chong had switched to ground mode of the F-58 and considered himself familiar with the dynamics behind dashing by the beast. He mastered it fast and moved on fluidly. There was a certain rhythm in his running. The F-58 was also built with an avant-garde buffering system, so Yi Chong had an easier time piloting it on ground. Imagine bumping in the urban jungle without it. Yi Chong might need a comfort bag and all the measly amount of stamina left might just go into the drain along with his pukes. The white mech was alerted by something as he stopped firing. He just silently followed Yi Chong behind. Yi Chong had fully adjusted the F-58's posture after a while but remained very close to the ground, with legs bent. Certainly a very strange posture to fly in. Yi Chong was helpless of this in actuality. F-58 was unarmed and keeping the same height with the sniper would be fatal. He could only try to ground the sniper by flying extremely low. That was his mere hope to fight back, or else, he would be running for his life and probably get shot and no more. There were a lot of moments where a shot could have been made, yet it never happened. Yi Chong was confused. What was holding him back? Or was it a miss? Yi Chong would never let the chance slip if he was the chaser. He would fire at every possible moment to nail the enemy. That was what living on the trash planet had taught him all these years, the blatant, crude, primal, supreme law of survival. He believed that such law might not be actually applicable in this society, especially after the incident the day before, but he believed that there were way more things unknown to him. He didn't encounter the unknown, he was literally thrown into the unknown. Thus, like what all humans would do, he would pick the method he trusted and knew best to conquer the unknown. Well, it seemed like Yi Chong still had a long journey down the road to understand society and change himself. The curved legs might appear to be awkward, however it would be the most effective way so far to dodge any incoming beam by changing the course using the leap of the legs. It could be a golden opportunity to have some circus tricks, but Yi Chong did not fancy the idea. The non-orderly wavy leap, the classic Thomas's spin, there are always times for those but not now. If I wanted to commit suicide there are better ways, thought Yi Chong as he changed his direction from time to time between the densely grouped buildings at an attempt to confuse the opponent. This would give him temporary cover too. The white mech seemed to have no counter for this. He stayed up high following Yi Chong. Yi Chong went lower and lower and tried his best to pick places with more buildings. That was a headache to the white mech because Yi Chong traveled like a phantom, sneaking from one spot to another. He would more likely to miss him if he were to lower his mech in the run. Out of the blue, the black mech in front of him disappeared. Yi Chong actually discovered a giant building in front, an extremely tall foundation. He got an idea and he rushed towards the corner of the building. Right when the white mech lost him, he jumped out of the cabin instantly and warped the F-58 back into the alternate dimension before he touched the ground. The people were staring at him in perplexity. He quickly submerged into the crowd and vanished. He walked with the flow and cautiously glanced at the white mech, halting in the sky a few times on the way. "You did improve, I guess," Mew praised. "Well, this is the best I could pull off," Yi Chong replied. "The location to claim your card is right at the central building in 500 meters. Got it." The central building was about 300 floors tall, coated in metallic texture with glasses of dim blue. It was a futuristic building in cold colors. And there seemed to be a parking space for mech or miniature aircrafts at every 3 floors. The interior was gently lit, decorated with walls of silver and countless cubicles separated by partitions of glass, both transparent and half-transparent. The lobby contained a number of hologram projectors that kept rolling out the procedures of any form of application. There were also a few processors nearby for customers' inquiry. Yi Chong walked to one of the kiosks there. His fingerprints were scanned along with his retina, followed by his skeletal structure. A diprotic scan was also performed. These were the essential procedures for verification purpose. And Yi Chong's identity was proven. The application of recreating your identity card has been completed. You may receive your card at your right. Please take good care of it, and if you lose it again, do come to us soon. A mechanical voice of a female rang at the kiosk after the verification process. Cup. A pale green card was spat out of the automated machine. "Have a nice day." He looked at his card with curiosity. It was about the size of his wrist, slightly smaller. "Yi, this is your identification document." You're no longer an outlaw. This took me way longer than I thought. The security at the residence info center was hard to get through. It took me a lot of effort just to get in. I almost got caught too. But luckily I'm fast. He laughed proudly. The card contained his full name, gender and other personal information. There was also a unique logo of Fall Galaxy. The identity card could be snapped after fingerprint verification to obtain the very core of the card, being the microchip. The chip could be placed into a specific kind of decoder to get more data. Well, of course, this was only useful for specific departments. Yi Chong kept his card carefully. He exited the building and headed back to his shop. The first wave of customers were coming anytime soon. He had got to make it back fast. He was tempted to re-summon F-58, yet, Yi Chong looked around. The white mech could be watching from anywhere. He wouldn't want another round of reckless race into the unknown. For what reason that white mech wanted to kill me so much? What did I do wrong? Yi Chong was puzzled. Some may have suggested the use of Mew, but that idea was long out of reach for Yi Chong, considering how Mew was so sassy to not let him have a ride for emergencies. Sigh, I'll just walk on my feet. He ran on his feet fast, all the way to the shop. The pedestrians at the side held their steps as they watched a road runner passing by. What the heck? This is impossible. He's too fast. Am I high? Am I seeing things? They were probably thinking these thoughts while looking at a grown man rushing through the street in rumbles. Yi Chong had to rush because the customers flooded the shop recently and most of them happened to be regular and returning customers. I made it. Right before the first wave of starving customers intruded. That was a miracle until, I'm tired, the customers of the shop were very self-aware of it seemed. There were only 32 seats in Grandpa Kian's shop. So anyone could tell the seats were very insufficient and the customers left the moment they finished their food. They never stayed and they gave the seats to the coming customers. It was good, but that simply did not give a moment for Yi Chong to even catch his breath. He was usually much more energetic, however he drained himself too much during the escape in the morning. You seemed worn out, my boy. Are you okay? Grandpa Qian asked unsettlingly upon seeing how Yi Chong was not his usual self. Yeah, I'm fine. That was his reply for every regard he received that day. Till the very last customer left in satisfaction, they finally got to start their meal. The rice tasted sweeter than usual. Everything just felt tastier. Yi Chong gargled the soup. In the midst of leisure, someone bashed into the place. Sun Xulin dragged Shou into the place as she pushed the door open. Grandpa Qian, shouted Xulin as soon as she stepped in, while her cousin was concealing herself behind. She wiped her face reddened by intense workouts and swiped her hazel fringe dampened by her sweat. Droplets of sweat rolled off like dewdrops in the morning. Her nose glossing in her youth were exhaling heavily. The formerly tight uniform covering her body had lost its formality by then, which the neckline had been unbuttoned while the sleeves had been outrageously raised, revealing arms of fair beauty. Her left hand was holding Shu's hand while her right was smudged by something. Grandpa Qian. We want 2 bowls of beef noodles. The usual. She then tugged her cousin all the way to the hand cleaner at the side. Beep. A flow of air slightly warm passed through their fingers. The black patches on her hands slid through the tips of her fingers and fell into the open doorway to the disposer. Xulin laid his chopsticks. Grandpa Qian stood up and looked at them in anxiety. What happened to my girls? Looking all flustered. Yi Chong in the meantime had already shifted to the kitchen and started cooking. Xulin pulled her beloved cousin Shou to the table and sat down right beside Grandpa Qian, giggled, sigh. You won't believe what had happened. I was getting home with Shoui, all happy and lucky. But then the mech just had to break itself out of a sudden. The worst thing was I actually broke my dimensional keystone too. I tried to fix it on my own but it didn't work. I got hungry so I decided to come back here for another meal first. Such a bad hair day for the girls. Grandpa Qian thought. So is the mech right outside the shop? He poured them some water as he asked. Ugh. Xulin gargled angrily, yeah. I never expected things could go wrong when it's just a stone's throw away from our house. This is depressing, especially when my parents aren't in too. And she sighed again but seemed more agitated than depressed. Grandpa Qian chuckled, Xulin, my girl, you sure act like your father. Why aren't you like your mother even a little? Drink it slower. Do it gently, Xulin. The drinks are all yours. Be like your cousin, Shou. Look at how gently she made her sip. Shou, while on her sip, was embarrassed by the compliments. She blushed and almost choked herself. It's nothing. She placed down her cup. Zulin looks pretty good too, doesn't she? Rubbing her hands together while slipping her fingers through as she muttered. You are just the shy kind, aren't you? Grandpa Qian was delighted. Shu's blush had gotten worse. Yeah, she's the shy kind ever since she was a child, stated Xulin while she laughed. A moment later, Yi Chong left the kitchen with 2 bowls of noodles. He placed it in front of the girls, sat down and continued digging in. Courtesy was no longer the best policy for Yi Chong when hunger was concerned. He had consumed too much stamina for the day. Hunger had taken over his mind. Nom. 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 Yi Chong was too busy emptying every bowl he got. Xulin and Shou held their chopsticks in daze. Is this a human? How many bowls has he eaten ever since we came in? The 7th. Or the 8th? Can a man get this hungry? It was not only because the amount he had eaten, it was also the rate of him finishing the bowls. The noodles appeared as if they were disintegrating rapidly the moment Yi Chong's lips reached the edge of the bowl. Seconds lapsed and he had already hit the bottom, moving on to the next. Xulin and Shou looked at each other awkwardly as their eyes went like saucers seeing the paranormal before them. Grandpa Qian on the other hand was tittering as usual. He had gotten used to the speed of Yi Chong engulfing the noodles. He was more bothered the fact that Yi Chong could be real tired for the day, considering it was the 11th bowl he dug into. That was 3 more bowls than his usual routine. His lips wriggled, wanting to tell him to get adequate rest and watch his own health. Nevertheless, something struck the old man. His eyes blinked. Yi, don't you know how to fix a mech by yourself? He remembered the fact that Yi Chong had a broken mech before. He was a complete layperson in this regard. He couldn't tell the difference between a pilot and a mechanic. But he just felt like asking for the poor little girls in front. Yi Chong chewed on. Xulin was shocked by Grandpa Qian's question. A little. Yi Chong slurped on. A hint of disdain flashed in Xulin's eyes. For real. Even an actual student from a mechanic school wouldn't dare to claim themselves so. Any person who could fix a mech on his or her own before 25 has to be a genius. How could this kitchen food gulping Dumbo be one? Very well, Yi. I had known Xulin since she was a child. So would you mind helping the girls out as an old man's request? Please. Okay. He just murmured his reply. He didn't lift his head at all and he carried on munching. Phew. That last bowl should do. Yi Chong had finished 15 bowls of noodles in total. He did seem a little bit tired since he usually would only need about 7 to 8 bowls to feel all full. He walked out of the shop straight away while Xulin hauled poor Shou off the table, all the way out. Xulin was expecting to see this novice Dumbo embarrass himself as he would be astounded by the complexity of her mech. He would be apologizing for his boastful words. Learn about talking with brains, not with your big mouth. Fee. He circled the SP2. I had seen this model before. But that was during the NRS training. If that was not the first opponent he encountered on the first day of his NRS training, he would have forgotten every single bit about this model of mech. The mech was a craft imprinted in his mind as he learned to fight with it the hard way. Through the fight he mastered the non-orderly wavy leap, which also happened to be the only advanced technique he knew that time. Wait, speaking of advanced technique, that piece of junk did not teach me any other so-called advanced technique since then. I'll make sure he teaches me everything else after this. He actually went daydreaming for a moment. He came back from his castle in the air he built afterwards. He took a careful inspection of the mech before him. He was acutely familiar with the structure of mechs. Back at Trash Planet, when he had been disassembled on different occasions, he knew everything like the back of his hands. Though Winnie was quite an outdated model compared to the SP2, both of them surprisingly did not share much difference. For the properties of SP2, he had learned them back when he hung out at Gudista, all at his fingertips, especially when the ancient elderlies at Aurora taught him both the experience and knowledge. Kek. Let's see what your big mouth can do. Seeing how Yi Chong seemed to be overwhelmed by her SP2, she snickered. She truly despised bragging, especially when the person didn't even have the quality to swagger. She anticipated the moment of truth for her to laugh wholeheartedly at the clown stumbling upon her craft. At the same time, Shou was staring at Yi in bewilderment. What he's doing all standing there? He really doesn't know how to fix it. Then he should not come for it. Xulin is going to laugh her jaws off, sigh. She showed worries in her eyes, knowing that how stubborn her cousin Xulin could get when the pilot field was concerned, no matter how friendly she acted normally. That was not the case. Yi Chong skillfully lifted the cover of the engine at the mech. And he checked every part of it swiftly. Xulin was astounded in the end instead. His instinct told him to diagnose the condition of the engine. Back at Gudista, he had seen posts in the forum on various stories about SP2, which had superior traveling speed but an inferior protection of the engine. Thus, the constant criticism from people. So he checked out on the engine first. The girls were shaking at the side, seeing how Yi Chong just jumped onto the tall SP2 without any aid or safety measure. He could just die from falling down. Xulin's mouth enlarged. She could barely lift her jaws. Her eyes flooded with disbelief. Shou by her side was covering her mouth, trying to hold her shriek. She wouldn't want to scream. What if it made Yi Chong fall? His intuition was accurate. The problem did lie within the engine. There was a tiny piece of something stuck in one of the major central circuits in the engine for some reason. The piece prevented the engine from working properly, which eventually led to a system failure. Well, this is simple. He simply took it out. After some engine cleaning, he got into the cabin and ran a few tests to make sure the system had been thoroughly repaired. Yup. System's up. He jumped out of the cabin. The SP2 was about 10 meters tall while the cabin was about 7 to 8 meters tall at the very least, and Yi Chong just jumped out of the cabin as if jumping off his bed without any form of ladders or ropes. Shou could hold it no longer. She shrieked and shrieked, covering her little mouth quivering. Xulin was stunned by how Yi Chong got off the mech. A perfect landing. A perfect pose. As soon as he landed, he curved his legs a little to cushion the shock. He looked like a compressed spring, a frog before its leap, passive yet potent. He got up, all done. As he bluntly replied and returned to the shop. He had a lot other work to do. No time to chit-chat with the girls. Xulin remained dumbfounded. Maybe she was the Dumbo after all. The shock before had yet faded in her mind. Xulin, what's wrong? Shou shook her shoulders, startled by her cousin's reaction. Aren't you going to see if it's really fixed? Oh. As if woken up from a dream, Xulin quickly tossed a rope over and climbed into the cabin. Beep. She activated the self-diagnosis program at the processor and she was in an ambivalence hoping for the result, whether is it positive or negative. 30 seconds passed and Xulin's head popped at the cabin entrance. In excitement she shouted, Shui. It's fixed. It's all fixed. Get up. Quick. We are getting home. She somehow hesitated a little. Nonetheless she boarded the mech afterwards. Xulin. Didn't you forget something? We haven't thanked the man. She ranted right after she got herself seated. Humphy. Xulin indifferently began setting up commands. That guy doesn't seem to care about anything. So why the appreciation? He acted as if I'm in debt to him or something. If you want to thank him, go alone. I'm not going. Shou bit her cherry lips. Isn't that a little rude? He helped us anyway. I think we should. Fine. Xulin grumbled. We would come and thank him the next time we visit Grandpa Qian's shop. I never knew he really could fix a mech at all before. Her fingers rubbed her gleaming chin as she pondered on. Oh well, it seems like the only thing we could do. Sighed Shou. Okay, we are getting back home. Oh no. Xulin. There's something else we forgot. We forgot to pay. What should we do? Ha. It's okay Shui. Grandpa Qian isn't this kind of person. He wouldn't mind if we pay him the next visit. Mew. Yi Chong summoned his partner right when he entered his room. He tumbled into the cabin, put on the helmet. Show me the visual of the white mech we see today. All right. Mew replied on spot. The image of the white mech projected before him. He observed in detail. It would be better to research on the enemy, though he had no idea why he became the target in the first place. Anyway, Yi. The routine bitter tongue nag commenced. Did you know how terrible your performance was today? This is so embarrassing I cannot zzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. Mew. Out of the blue, Mew's voice trailed off. His voice was distorted towards the end, as if something was interrupting the transmission. The visual in the helmet was acting goofy too. Mew. The visual disappeared, while a bunch of snow and white noises remained. Mew's voice was utterly gone. The helmet went pitch black after that. Mew, Mew. He removed his helmet and spoke in his mind with dismay. Why aren't you, Mew? Speak to me, Mew. Speak to me. Mew fell immediately silent, and Yi Chong panicked. Whenever something happened to Mew, Yi Chong found out that he was never of much help. The only thing he could do now was wait. He would wait until Mew awakened again. Could it be that the energy cells were depleted? Yi Chong quickly stood up and rushed to check Mew's energy cells. No. That's not the problem. Mew's energy cells were still at 80%. Then what's the problem? Yi Chong racked his brains but could not figure out the reason. His only option left was to sit quietly by Mew's side and wait. Yi Chong sat beside Mew for the entire afternoon, but Mew was still motionless, showing no signs of awakening. Time passed by, and without his notice, he had sat through the entire afternoon. Outside his room, Grandpa Qian called, "A guest is here." Yi Chong looked at the time, and found that it was already evening. He gave a meaningful look at Mew before heading out. It was time to work. Yi Chong looked dejected, and worked without much enthusiasm. Grandpa Qian had asked Yi Chong a few times if he was feeling uncomfortable, but Yi Chong only shook his head every time. Grandpa Qian's expression was one of worry. Finally, all the customers had left. Yi Chong left after just eating 2 servings, and Grandpa Qian was worried about him. The boy had never eaten so little. Yi Chong returned to his room in a depressed mood. As he closed the door behind him, Mew's voice rang. Yi Chong paused and his head snapped up. His eyes filled with bottomless joy, and the edges of his mouth lifted into an arch. "Mew, you're all right now." "That's great." The excited Yi Chong leapt onto Mew's knees. "You scared me just now. Are you all right now?" Mew was silent for a while. Based on available information, the probability of controlling the situation was from 58.5% to 61.2%. Yi Chong was shocked. "What happened?" "Mew, you seem to have changed a lot before this." Yi Chong thought for a moment before continuing, "And now you're back to normal." Mew spoke lightly. "Your statement is accurate to a certain extent." Yi Chong was perplexed. "What's really going on, Mew?" Mew calmly explained, "There is an unnamed program in inactive mode that has been in my information records all this time. I had repeatedly tried to activate it, as I believe it is most probably information related to my history. However, I had never found a way to activate it. The violent impact during our escape from the trash planet had activated this program, and I realized it was a photon-simulated intelligence program." Upon seeing Yi Chong's confused expression, Mew continued explaining, "A photon-simulated intelligence program, or psychology, is an autonomous decision-making program present in advanced photon processors. Different psis have different characteristics and temperaments, and they have a strong inclination to reject other psis. Fundamentally, I am also a psi. This psi in me has a 86.9% probability of being the former controller of my photon processor. For some reason, it was forced into inactive mode, and after that, Yi, had activated a new psi in the photon processor that was me. We are born from the same photon processor, and based on the same learning mechanism and decision-making system. This also implied that we could not destroy one another, and could only compete for control of the photon processor. From the last impact, his sudden activation placed me in a passive situation, and he managed to take control. However, based on our characteristics, I am more aggressive, and thus have a higher probability of between 8.5% to 11.2% of winning against him. This is why he was suppressed by me today. However, this probability advantage will continue to decrease until both have equal power." Mew noticed Yi Chong's confused expressed and spoke his mind without care. "At your level, the probability of you understanding this complicated predicament is only 21%. The remark was promptly ignored by Yi Chong as he spoke in realization. "Ah, that means in your body there's 2, what's that called?" Yi Chong frowned in thought. "Psi." Mew provided. "Right, psi. But that psi thing had no ill will towards me." Yi Chong recalled the earlier in time where he thought Mew was acting a little different, but it did not make Yi Chong feel that the mech was another Mew. Mew agreed. "Yes. Since we are using the same information records archive, his information-based decisions will be the same as mine. Hence, his attitude towards you will be no different to that of mine, but expressed with a different personality and temperament." Yi Chong scratched his head in distress. So complicated. As expected, anything related to photon processors is bound to be dull. Yi Chong, who was entirely uninterested in photon processors, made his conclusion. "I'm afraid it is to you." Mew commented calmly. Yi Chong sat in Mew's pilot cabin, continuing his work from earlier in the morning. As for Mew's predicament, Yi Chong knew he would be of no help, and Mew would have to handle it himself. Yi Chong carefully inspected the white mech image pulled from Mew's information records archive. Pure white mechs were rare, as were pure black mechs. The elongated design and lack of any sharp edges due to its rounded designs meant that the mechs did not have the vicious quality found in common mech models. In its hand was a similarly white and odd-looking gun. From the diameter of the barrel, it may even qualify as a cannon. From an average person's perspective, the mech was definitely majestic and as graceful as an aristocrat amongst the feathered species, the white swan. However, Yi Chong obviously did not feel the same. Yi Chong only felt an extreme sense of danger. The white mech may seem as graceful as an aristocrat, but Yi Chong would not underestimate its potential as a threat. Yi Chong was sure that the odd-looking gun in his hand must have some underlying power, and was not just some plaything. Yi Chong also noticed with his sharp observation that the mech had at least 32 concealed weapons cache, and that was quite astonishing to Yi Chong. This is surely too much. Is there a need to have so many of them? Besides, can the pilot in the mech control them all? The energy consumption must also be huge. Is he thinking of shooting all of them in one go and end the battle? No matter how he saw it, Yi Chong did not believe that this was a common advanced level mech. Yi Chong definitely thought that the mech was even more technologically advanced than his F-58. No matter how well the F-58 performed, it was still a training mech and its weapons were far outstripped by the opponents. Why would he want to kill me? Yi Chong could not figure it out. Only the Reno Society had qualms with him, but would Reno Society own a mech like this? Yi Chong was a little wary of that fact. Besides, Reno Society definitely knew nothing of his whereabouts. Then who could it be? Black Cove. If Black Cove had ill designs for him, then it would be a plausible scenario. However, the mech was obviously a contrast to Black Cove's usual style. The difference was too striking, and thus, it was probably not Black Cove. Then who would it be? Yi Chong agonizingly searched his memories. The opponent had crash-landed into me while I was flying with the F-58. The opponent probably did not know my identity, and could only recognize the mech. Could it be that the F-58 made me an enemy? But wait. The F-58 was a Black Cove training mech, which meant that the opponent must know about the F-57 and understand that it was a Black Cove training mech. So does this mean that the opponent thought I am a Black Cove citizen and therefore, treated me as an enemy? Then it seemed highly likely that the opponent is an enemy of Black Cove. As he considered this idea, Yi Chong began to believe that it made sense. He must be an enemy of Black Cove. He must have mistook him as someone from Black Cove. This seemed to be the only reasonable explanation. By then, Mew's voice rang out. Based on currently available information and my calculations, the probability that the opponent is an enemy of Black Cove is about 71%. The uncertainty is due to insufficient information and therefore not calculable. As expected, Mew's calculations arrived at the same conclusion as he did. If that was the case, then what should he do? Yi Chong was troubled. He had been training on his speed lately, and did not spend any time on strength training. Now, he had reached another bottleneck in his speed. Since speed was achieved through strength, without support from the appropriate amount of strength, his speed could only stay at its current level. However, this was not the trash planet, where metallic trash was abundant and everywhere, as it was easy to find a piece of metal of suitable size there. Yi Chong had trained his strength with the most basic and simple method, using weights. He did weightlifting and used weights in exercises such as running and squatting. However, he was considerably stronger now, such that if he continued with the same training method, he would need much heavier weights to fulfill his needs. Otherwise, it would be difficult to achieve the desired results. Except for a few rare materials, none were dense enough to meet Yi Chong's requirements. However, one thing he could be certain of was that the materials that were dense enough were not obtainable at the present moment. Without a high enough density, the weight would be too much, besides being inconvenient. It would then be impossible to carry out training at Grandpa Kian's house. Mew was interested in the dilemma with Yi Chong's muscular development. Yi, your muscles are still not significantly developing. Yi Chong was not too concerned. Didn't you say it's all right like this? Mew evenly replied, it is all right, I'm just curious about your state of development. Yi Chong shook his head. I don't know the reason for it too. I've always been like this since young, never very muscular. Based on what you said, I should be much more muscular by now. Mew agreed. By right, you should not be having this body form. However, I cannot inspect your body without proper measuring equipment. Yi Chong did not mind about it. At least it isn't a bad thing. Mew bluntly replied, information is insufficient to calculate that. Yi Chong suddenly thought of something. Mew, my basic pilot training is almost complete. When are you teaching any advanced techniques? I can only perform one now, the non-orderly wavy leap. Mew said, advanced techniques are based on fundamental movements executed with unique battle strategies in mind. Yi Chong cut him off. Just tell me if you're teaching or not. Mew responded, only if you insist on it. However, do you have a spare mech? Yi Chong thought about it and felt discouraged. Ah, I only have the F-58. That white mech seems to have a grudge against Black Cove. If we meet again by accident, it will be disastrous. If it was not for the good terrain last time, it would probably be a lot riskier. Mew said, it seems that the probability of you performing any pilot training is 0. Yi Chong felt that Mew was definitely taking pleasure in his misfortune. Yi Chong suddenly brightened up. How about if I go for the NR training center? Mew disagreed. The NR training center is incapable of granting you further improvement. What you lack now is experience in actual combat. However realistic the virtual net may feel like, it is incomparable to engaging in reality. Yi Chong groaned. Actual combat. There's nothing I can do about that. Without his training routine, Yi Chong felt idle most of the time. Mew suggested that he go out more often, since Yi Chong was still far from fully integrating into society, and many of his thoughts were still too different from the average person's. Grandpa Qian agreed with the idea that Yi Chong should explore the outside world more, commenting that he looked the very opposite of lively, and should leave the house for a while every day. He even generously offered Yi Chong some Zwan credits as allowance. Thus, Yi Chong went out to the streets under the support of both Mew and Grandpa Qian. Unlike last time, where Yi Chong had the very definitive aim of obtaining his identity card when he went outside, this time it was purely for leisure. Yi Chong stood outside the main door, unable to decide where to head to first. Should he turn left? Or right? Or just walk straight ahead? The observant Grandpa Qian noticed Sun Xulin and Xiao some distance ahead, and greeted them loudly. Xulin. Sun Xulin looked towards the direction of the voice, saw Grandpa Qian, and immediately grabbed Xiao along to meet the old man. Good day, Grandpa Qian. Xiao also greeted demurely. Good day, Grandpa Qian. Grandpa Qian laughed in delight. Hee, today Xiao took the initiative to greet me first, what a rare occasion. Xiao immediately blushed in a cherry shade. Grandpa Qian asked the two, are you going out for a walk? Sun Xulin replied, yes, would Grandpa like us to get you anything? Grandpa Qian smiled. Oh no, but Yi has since only arrived at Blue Ocean for a short while, and he's still unfamiliar with the place. If you're heading out for a walk, can you bring Yi with you? Besides, you're of the same age, he should be good company. Grandpa Qian dragged the awkwardly standing Yi Chong over to the girls. Sun Xulin answered readily, sure. No problem, leave it to us. She had been extremely curious about Yi all this while. Now that the opportunity presented itself, there was no reason for her to reject it. On the other hand, Xiao watched curiously at Yi Chong from behind Xulin. Yi Chong still wore a plain expression. Grandpa Qian was overjoyed. That's great. Then I leave it to you. Yi, you go along with them and have fun. Yi Chong acknowledged with an okay, since he had no idea where to go himself. Having a guide familiar with the area was not a bad idea, since he would then also be able to observe how normal people live their lives. The trio walked along side by side. Yi Chong watched the occasional mechs flying over him, filled with envy. It was a pity that he had a mech but was unable to use it. The fact soured his mood. Yi Chong did not take the initiative to speak, and Sun Xulin, feeling that the situation was getting awkward, spoke up to ease the tension. Yi, is your real name also Yi? Yi Chong formed a short and firm reply, Yi Chong. No words came from him after that. Since Yi Chong kept silent, Sun Xulin continued, I'm called Sun Xulin, this here is Xiao. Sun Xulin braced through the introductions. I know. Yi Chong replied. Just as Sun Xulin was beginning to run out of ideas, the usually timid Xiao made her move. Yi, where are you from? Yi Chong almost continued with Trash Planet, but stopped himself just in time and quickly asked Mew in his mind, Mew, where am I from? Mew replied, your identity card indicates that your origin planet is Richie. Being superficial, Yi Chong replied calmly, Richie. Richie. The two girls shook their heads at that, since they had never heard of it. There were countless planets in the galaxy, and a vast number of planets in the 5 main galaxies were inhabited. Unless one was a specialized researcher in planetary geography, the average person would not know the names of many inhabited planets. What Sun Xulin would like to know the most was the condition of Yi Chong's mech. However, she was unsure of how to approach the subject. She had initially planned to get familiar with him by chatting before asking him about it, but she did expect Yi Chong to be a man of few words. Of course, she was not aware that if she had asked Yi Chong in a direct manner, the man would have probably answered her straight. I can't believe this guy is so simple-minded. Sun Xulin thought with outrage. In reality, no one could not blame Yi Chong for this. Yi Chong would only show his more casual side to Mew. He could not do so Grandpa Qian, much less someone he was unfamiliar with like Sun Xulin and Xiao. Yi Chong observed the people on the streets. They all seemed very calm, lacking the vigilance and hostility that wild animals show against an unfamiliar entity entering their territory. They also do not seem aggressive. It seems that the living principles of the mutants on the trash planet are not suited here after all. I'll have to be more wary in future, Yi Chong thought. Suddenly, the three noticed a huge commotion up ahead. Sun Xulin pulled Xiao along and rushed towards the commotion. Yi Chong frowned, as he was not fond of situations like this. It was too noisy, and the crowd was too dense, such that his area of movement was more restricted. It would also be more difficult for him to have a good grasp of the situation around him. Yi Chong knitted his brows, but still followed the two into the crowd. In the center of the commotion, an old man was knocked onto the ground, his belongings scattered about. A middle-aged man was hurling angry words at the old man. "You old geezer, are you blind? This suit of mine costs gold yuan. Can you pay for it if you had damaged it? Look, it's all wrinkled now, it'll cost a few hundred yuan to fix it." The man gave a look of disdain at the elderly. "Look at your pitifully poor self, I guess you can't really pay for it. Humphy, I'll count myself unlucky today. What a blind old fool." The man was all stuck up and arrogant. Sun Xulin was the first to respond, as she pointed furiously at the middle-aged man and retaliated. "You've gone too far, how can you spew those useless words when you've knocked down an old man? That's enough, if you speak again I'll teach you a real lesson." Hemp. Sun Xulin rolled up her sleeves, ready to act true to her words. Xiu went to the old man and helped him up with some difficulty. She carefully brushed off dust from the old man's body and asked softly, "Grandpa, are you all right?" The elderly was grateful for her help. "I'm all right, little miss, thank you." Xiu returned a mellow smile. "You little btch, how dare you speak to me like that? Didn't your elders teach you some basic manners?" "Hemph, I can tell that you're just as despicable." "Hemph, let me tell you minus." Sun Xulin was absolutely ballistic, her fists wrapped tighter and tighter. Xiu quickly went to placate her before she went berserk. If a fight took place, they would not be in a good position in the face of the law. The middle-aged man was pleased to see Sun Xulin holding herself back. "Hee, little miss, let me tell you." Their confrontation was not noticed by Yi Chong, as he was completely distracted by a tiny holographic case on the ground. Perhaps the term case would confuse one of its actual size, since the case was only 5 mm square in area, small and compact. On its light purple surface was a pattern of two lines spiraling around each other like a corkscrew, and its two sides were slightly depressed inwards. A pinhole was located at the front side, which projected multicolored light rays that formed a semi-transparent person. The projection was very realistic, and looked like a miniature version of the old man. Holographic cases were usually used to record certain events and were more expensive than memory chips. They were also commonly used for commemorative purposes. However, what caught Yi Chong's attention was not the case itself, but the report that was currently being made by the miniature old man. Regarding the photon processor's design, I had combined Fairfax's annuli and short-pulse photon circuits. About this idea, I should mention that I've met a young friend on the virtual net who suggested this combination, and thus inspired me to. This was obviously a report during an academic conference. Wasn't the combination of Fairfax's annuli and short-pulse photon circuits a method that Grandpa Shu specialized in? He had even meticulously explained the idea to Yi Chong before. Could this be Grandpa Shu? Yi Chong could not help but scrutinize the old man before him, and find that the old man looked a little similar to Grandpa Shu. Yi Chong came forward and tested his idea. "Grandpa Shu." The old man froze. "You are?" Old Shu looked at the young man before him. Usually, those who knew him called him Old Shu or Professor Shu, while only those who were his relatives or younger family members of his friends called him Grandpa Shu. However, the person before him was a stranger. Could he be a grandson of one of his friends? Yi Chong knew from his expression that his guess was not wrong. He continued excitedly, "Grandpa Shu, it's me, little YC, do you remember me? That little Y from Aurora? YC. He's YC. Sun Xulin was bursting with anger and nearly went berserk earlier, but she quieted down upon hearing Yi Chong's revelation. Xiu covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes filled with disbelief. The two girls were stupefied, and exchanged a glance of obvious joy. Yi Chong was completely absorbed in meeting Grandpa Shu that he missed their odd reaction. However, even if he did not, he would not have thought it was related to him. Grandpa Shu was also astonished, and grabbed Yi Chong's hands tightly with emotion. "Little Y. Your little Y. That's wonderful. That's wonderful." Grandpa Shu was overwhelmed, such that he got a little repetitive in his words. Yi Chong gave a bashful smile. Grandpa Shu immediately recognized that smile and became more assured of his identity. Sun Xulin and Xiao, on the other hand, looked as though they had seen a ghost. They did not think it was possible to see an expression like that on Yi Chang's face. Their faces now were undoubtedly more expressive than Yi Chang's. The middle-aged man noticed that Yi Chang seemed to be familiar with the old man, and an idea came to his mind. He shamelessly pronounced, "Ha, you old geezer, you messed up my top-of-the-line outfit that's worth 5 golden swan, better pay up now." Yi Chang purposely ignored the middle-aged man and gripped Grandpa Xu's arms to support him. "Grandpa Shu, let's go." Grandpa Shu nodded. Let's go." Sun Xulin and Xiao supported the old man from the other side. The middle-aged man grew anxious as they were about to leave, and made a grab for Yi Chang. "No can do, you can't just walk away like that, you gotta pay me back first. Let me tell you, I'm a man of status." Before the middle-aged man could get to Yi Chang made his move. With a slight move, Yi Chang clasped onto the man's throat. As he was about to move in for the kill, Mu anxiously reminded him, "Don't." Yi Chang paused. Fortunately, Yi Chang now had better control over his strength, or the man would have definitely lost his life. Yi Chang was confused. "Mu, what is it?" Mu replied, "Based on my information, killing on the streets would violate the local law, and you'll be heavily pursued." "Oh, law. What's that?" "Rules that humans create for their society." "Oh, but has that got to do with me? I still don't really get it." "It's complicated, but this is obviously not a good time to discuss it." "Alright, we'll talk about it later, but what do I do now?" "Based on my information, threatening is not a bad option. Based on theories and social psychology, your opponent is obviously shocked. With an appropriate level of threatening, the probability of ending this altercation will be over 92%. Threatening it is. I'll try it out." The crowd noticed a flash of movement before Yi Chang's right hand was clasped tightly on the middle-aged man's throat. The man felt the pressure and struggled desperately with his mouth gasping for air. The spectators also gasped in astonishment. Yi Chang quietly whispered into the man's ear, "If you don't let this go, I'll kill you." His tone was light, as if he was only saying something mundane. The middle-aged man clawed at his throat and coughed incessantly. He was obviously in pain, unable to utter a single word, and his eyes glowed with terror. Yi Chang's words were like a chilling breeze in winter, and he felt like a naked man in the wind, shivering despite being clothed. Suddenly, there was a commotion amongst the spectating crowd, and someone shouted, "The police are here." Thank goodness, the police are finally here. His reunion with Grandpa Shu was a joyful matter, but Yi Chang did not expect the reunion to be under such circumstances. The police officer who came to the scene was Fei, who came to find Yi Chang at Grandpa Qian's house earlier. Fei noticed the finger marks on the middle-aged man's throat and immediately came up with some excuse to get the man out of the area. "Just get this settled fast, who knows when the guy would go crazy." "That'll be my field day," thought the inspector sarcastically. Grandpa Shu was more uptight with Sun Xulin and Xiao, but far more casual with Yi Chang. They occasionally discussed academic problems, and this reminded Yi Chang of his days at Aurora. However, once he was outdoors, Yi Chang resumed his dull composure. Blue Ocean was an economically and technologically advanced planet with a population of 600 million. Its society championed openness and freedom, and the planet offered abundant natural resources. These were the reasons the planet was coveted as an ideal home by its many inhabitants. Jesha, where Yi Chang stayed, was one of the 3 largest zones on Blue Ocean, and also the most prosperous of the 3. It was already late when Yi Chang returned to Grandpa Qian's house. After finishing his work, Yi Chang returned to his room. He believed in the need to understand more about the society he lived in, as there were many things here that contradicted his principles. The sooner he could understand this society, the better and easier he could live within it. Without a doubt, Mu was his only teacher for the task. Yi Chang began by asking, "Mu, let's continue our topic this morning. What do you mean by law?" Mu replied, "Based on my information, it will be easier for you to understand the law as rules set by the strongest members of society." The strongest members. Stronger than me. Mu kept his tone light, but condescension was positively radiating from his choice of words. "Based on my information, the gap between your strengths is almost as wide as the universe itself." Yi Chang changed his tack. "If I had killed that man today, what would happen to me?" Mu replied, "Based on the Blue Ocean Penal Code, Article 11, a convicted murderer would face up to 40 years of prison life, and if the act of murder was atrocious, the murderer could be sentenced to death." Yi Chang frowned. "Who are the law executors?" Based on Blue Ocean safety measures, all police officers, military officers, and safety department personnel have the right to pursue and capture violators of the law, while all members of the public are obligated to assist in the capture. Fortunately, Yi Chong knew his own strength and was not arrogant enough to believe that he was the best amongst the rest. With so many against him, it would not take the strongest to defeat him, as even the average person could take him down. Yi Chong was beginning to understand the risks behind acts of violence. However, he was also quick to notice a problem. What as I did it discreetly? Mu replied, based on my information, if they do not discover evidence for your act of murder, you will not be sentenced for any punishment. Evidence. Objects, witnesses or other things that can prove your crime. So, if I am careful enough, and they could not obtain any evidence, does that mean I'll be beyond the law? You're right up to a certain level, but I must remind you, they have quite a few practical and brilliant methods up their sleeves. The probability of them discovering your activities cannot be ignored. Oh, so it's actually a matter of a battle of strength. You're right up to a certain level. Underscore 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 underscore. Ji Shengyan was happily humming a little tune as he deftly maneuvered his jaw-droppingly expensive mech. Ji Shengyan may sound like a feminine name, but he was undeniably male. However, his gender-neutral appearance was often mistaken for a female's, his silvery white hair framed a pair of enchanting blue eyes, and his gentle smile had bewitched a great many fair maidens. Ji Shengyan's mech was painted mostly in alternating blues and grays, with a few important components emphasized in gold. The hull was streamlined, with a dimmed shade of blue that gave it a demure quality, and a silver hue that made the mech look sturdier. The slightly protruding chest of the mech was a sign of reinforced armor, emanating a steady and calm presence. Ji Shengyan's mech piloting skills were applaudable, as was demonstrated by his nimble traversal amongst the buildings in Jesha. If he succeeded in his visit to Old Shu this time, he would have rendered great service. However, it seemed that Old Shu was difficult to approach. What should he do? Ji Shengyan rubbed between his eyebrows in vexation, as he still did not have a workable plan. His eldest brother was rejected last time, and passed the task to him. No matter what, he must find a way to convince Old Shu. If one trip was not enough, he would visit again and again. Old Shu was alone at home. Since his partner's passing, and with the lack of any children, he was now all alone. The emptiness in his house and his life did not leave him unaffected. His engagement in research had helped, but he did not expect to achieve a breakthrough in his field in later years and gain prominence. However, he was getting old and weathered nowadays. His photon processor signaled the arrival of a guest. Through the processor's holographic images, Elder Shu saw an unfamiliar and charming young man. This was not someone he recognized, and Elder Shu grew suspicious. Through the visitor's intercom, Elder Shu asked, "Who are you looking for?" A device right outside the main door of his house projected his image before the entrance. Ji Shengyan observed the image and decided, based on his intel, that it must be the target of his visit, Elder Shu. Ji Shengyan replied respectfully, "You must be Professor Shu. I'm Ji Shengyan, and I've been to a few of your talks. I was wondering if I could have your advice on a few matters regarding mechs." Oh, Elder Shu hesitated and thought. Visitors with academic intentions were common, but they were mostly past their 40s. This was the first time Elder Shu encountered someone as young as him. Ji Shengyan. Elder Shu seemed to realize something. "Your surname is Ji." Ji Shengyan felt his heart skipped a beat and knew that things were turning sour, but he still braced himself and replied affirmatively. "Yes. You're a member of the Ji family." Elder X's expression twisted. Ji Shengyan cursed on the inside and kept silent. Elder Shu continued indifferently, "The Ji family, enough with your demands, there's no need to waste any more time on this, I will never cooperate with you. Just give up now." Elder Shu ignored Ji Shengyan and terminated communication. His projection vanished before Ji Shengyan's eyes. It seemed that his eldest brother had really offended Elder Shu last time. However, what troubled Ji Shengyan the most was that the older man had his loathing against his brother extended towards the entire Ji family. This made his task of convincing Elder Shu to work with the Ji family that much more difficult. After a moment's thought, Ji Shengyan produced his comm device and spoke to the person on the receiving end. You all better keep old Shu under tight surveillance. I want his daily activities and whereabouts, and a list of the people he gets in touch with. And get their identities and addresses, understand? Do not slack. I want all the details, remember, all of it. Ji Shengyan was out of ideas, and could only resort to surveillance for the moment. After disconnecting his comm device, Ji Shengyan continued his miserable pondering. What can he do to convince Elder Shu? Nowadays, whenever Yi Chong was on the virtual net, he did not just frequent Aurora in Gudista and the NR training center. Instead, he began to explore further. He had decided to completely understand the strange world around him. Yi Chong understood that survival in some locations are dependent on one's understanding of the area. The more one understood, the easier life would become. His daily conversations with Mew increased his understanding of things. Recently, he spent more time outdoors since he grew fond of observing passersby on the streets. While they were not Yi Chong's prey, he still treated them as though they were prey. He examined them through a hunter's eye, carefully examining the people around him, observing their actions, habits, behaviors, physical conditions, and so on. As Yi Chong continued his observation, his understanding of his surroundings began to deepen. While he had planned to visit Grandpa Shu today, his job mattered more. Yi Chong understood that Grandpa Shen's little business could not support his stay, but there is more to living than making money. Is that not so? Grandpa Xian made him feel at home, and this was not something any amount of gold swan could buy for him. While Yi Chong did not think of himself as highly intelligent, this was something he could still understand. Yi Chong kneaded the dough with vigor as the flour mixture twisted and folded under his strength. Yi Chong had improved his skill, thanks to the increasingly refined control of his strength. The noodles he made had a distinct taste, and were definitely one of a kind. Now, if only he could have one more mech, even a raven would do and life would be perfect. Sun Xulin and Xiao came to see him. The two waited patiently until he was done with his work before coming up to him. Sun Xulin grabbed Xiao along, and began with a tiny voice, Yi. Yi Chong gave the two an expressionless look. What is it? Sun Xulin flustered at his apathy, and continued mumbling, Yi, Yi. Yi Chong continued staring at them. Xiao did not even dare to raise her head. Sun Xulin grew more nervous. Yi, we'd like to ask for you help. Help. Yi Chong frowned. His words unexpectedly calmed Sun Xulin. Do you know how to modify mechs? A bit. Yi Chong replied. Sun Xulin continued, and we'd like to ask for your help. Our school is having the MP Games next week, and there's a section where a mech modification technician is needed. I'd like to ask for your help. Ask for my help. Yi Chong looked at the duo. Oddly, against Yi Chong's flat stare, Sun Xulin grew anxious again. Yes, we'd like to ask for your help. Yi Chong gave it a thought before answering. Oh, sure, but I charge 1,250 yuan per hour. Sun Xulin was stupefied, but quickly turned furious. You, are you charging for helping out? You, I didn't think you were someone like this. Hemph, I guess we're wrong about you. She spoke in pure disdain. Xiao also lifted her gaze towards Yi Chong in astonishment, obviously surprised by his reaction. Against the duo's expressions, Yi Chong frowned a little. What did I do wrong this time? Yi Chong had actually offered to charge at half the market rate, since he did not actually have a modification technician's license. Yi Chong asked in his mind, Mew, I thought a fair deal was one of the most basic rules. Mew replied, based on my information, you're absolutely right. However, most people believe that charging a friend when helping them is disgraceful. Yi Chong was confused. Are they my friends? Mew had no intention of helping him on this one. That is for you to decide. Yi Chong decisively announced, of course not. Friends. What a joke, we're not even that familiar with them. No matter how I see it, they were not friends. And if they were not friends, then charging for my service was reasonable. What's so strange about that? Since he did not commit any mistakes, Yi Chong had no intention of further discussion. He gave the two a flat look and declared, you're welcome to leave. Before turning his back to them. Sun Xulin paled in anger and dragged Xiao along and left. The conflict did not affect Yi Chong in the slightest. After greeting Grandpa Qian, he began his leisurely stroll to the streets. Yi Chong was not as dazed as he was before on the streets. Instead, he now felt comfortable. People watching had become a great hobby of his, one that he found to be quite interesting. Grandpa Xu's place was some distance away from Grandpa Qian's little shop. If he kept at his speed, the trip would take too long. Yi Chong decidedly picked up his pace and began running. He did not run too fast, for he was no longer as ignorant as before to understand that his speed was simply too incredible when compared to the average person. The first engulfer to attract attention gets the death sentence. This was a truth that Yi Chong understood. If I have a mech to use, I wouldn't need to walk. Yi Chong felt dispirited as he recalled the white mech. It was a pity that he only had a training mech. If he had a Black Cove war mech, Yi Chong was certain that he could definitely finish off his opponent. If Mew agreed to help him, Yi Chong believed that the white mech would not stand a chance. However, Mew had been insistent in his refusal, and Yi Chong felt odd about his reaction. Yi Chong leisurely ran on the streets, his breathing rhythmic and entirely unaffected. This level of exertion was nothing to Yi Chong. His strange physique was something that puzzled even Mew, but Yi Chong did not feel that he was in any way abnormal. The way he saw it, since it was something beneficial, it did not matter if he did not understand why. Grandpa Xu's house was getting nearer, just around the corner. The last time Elder Shu hyperlinked to the virtual net, he had spread the news of YC whereabouts on Blue Ocean to his other old companions. They were at once jealous and envious of Elder Shu, and a few of them even proclaimed to visit Blue Ocean one day to see Yi Chong. As for the few who were already residing on Blue Ocean, but in other zones, they had offered their addresses to Yi Chong and invited him to visit anytime. Yi Chong felt comfortable with the academic atmosphere during his discussion with Grandpa Shu, and he relished it. The thought of meeting with Grandpa Shu soon made him a little excited. Mew suddenly spoke up to Yi Chong when he was heading straight towards Grandpa Xu's house. Yi, careful, stay away. There are 4 mechs monitoring the area. There's also another person, probably the commander. Yi Chong felt a chill down his spine, and asked frantically, where? Yi Chong did not change his pace, and walked past Grandpa Xu's house like any other passerby, never slowing down. Mew replied, there's one at the top of the high-rise on the opposite side of the road, and another 2 at 120 degrees from the first one. There's also someone in the high-rise directly opposite of Grandpa Xu's house, on the 21st floor. This one's probably the commander. The commander, I must get rid of him first, and do so without alerting the rest or risk complications. Yi Chong assessed the situation. Yi Chong thought with contempt, are these people looking for trouble with Grandpa Shu? Probably so. No matter how you look at it, they're definitely here with ill intentions. And if they're here with ill intentions, then? Yi Chong continued running leisurely, calmly, with all signs of normalcy. When he reached the tall building directly opposite Grandpa Xu's house, Yi Chong came to a stop and entered the building. Yi Chong found a self-service inquiry photon processor in the corner of the main reception, pretending to look up some information. 2 seconds later, Mew had already hacked into the photon processor. The original image on the screen suddenly vanished, replaced by the building's complete structural schematics. The surveillance commander was on the 21st floor, room 065. Mew had also indicated the locations of all the surveillance devices. The building surveillance system was fairly complete, with a large coverage area and very few blind spots. To enter the building discreetly would not be an easy task. Yi Chong clearly remembered the idea of evidence as Mew once described. He asked Mew, if I'm recorded in the system, can you wipe them out? Based on available information, the success rate is above 97%. Mew sounded exceedingly confident. Yi Chong considered the situation. Then if I can wipe out all my records before they notice, does it mean that they won't figure out who did it? Mew replied after a moment, based on my calculations, there's a 79% probability that they would not notice you, but there is still another 21% probability of finding you out through other means. After some pondering, Yi Chong decided, if that's the case, then we'll make the first move. We'll not wait for them to come to us, but get to them first. Yi Chong had no concept of striking after an opponent's move, since he had confirmed the opponent's hostility, he would not hesitate to act. His words were filled with confidence and dominance. Yi Chong was like a wild beast ready to put on a fight. Mew had no objections to his plan. After deciding on the course of action, Yi Chong began his move. He moved quickly to the 21st floor and came before the door of room 065. The door was well secured, and while Yi Chong was confident he could break through this particular type of alloy metal, the act would alert the room's inhabitant. With the enemy alerted, his position would be compromised, and Yi Chong doubted he could best 4 mechs surrounding him at once. He must eliminate the person in the room first, in order to greatly reduce the probability of him being surrounded and attacked. The problem was, how could he eliminate this person without alerting the other 4? Slender had his eyes fixed on the security camera. His sight wafted through the hologram in the monitor of an image projecting the accommodation of that old man Shu. He observed meticulously. He was trying his very best to discern the appearance of every passerby near X's place, especially those who happened to be in that old man's proximity, just to identify if they were knitted together. He was devoted and held initiatives towards his job. He knew that the authority assigned him to this job instead of others because of such good nature he had. I'll find those nasty rats out, by then, I'll. A hand covered his mouth out of the blue. Stiffness had skimmed down his neck before he could react. Splashes of blood gushed out from him. Are those my old blood? No, no way. Slender was horrified as he struggled, wriggling helplessly through the cold hand gripping him like a wrench. I can't die. I can't die just yet. He bawled in his mind, but he was already losing control of his body by that moment. The stiffness strangling his neck remained like a freezing breeze, slowly consuming his stamina as he bled profusely. Oozes of pain blinded him as he went unconscious and finally stopped moving soon after. Not till he was utterly dead Yi Chong would be letting the man go. He tossed Slender to the ground. He turned away and was going to run, yet that door is such a nuisance. It was a problem for Yi Chong because it was made out of metal and he could not simply break a metallic door without alarming anyone in the building. Fortunately, the white wall before him prompted some ideas. It was a wall of thermoplastic composite, having a thickness about 10 centimeters and an effective noise absorber. It is only thicker than the heavy metallic door by 2 to 3 centimeters, but way better. Who doesn't like walls with noise absorption property? Especially strong ones like this. It comes in handy. Firstly, he went downstairs to the lobby and had set security cameras in all 21 floors of the building to sleep mode. Of course, such a tech-savvy task would be of Mew's responsibility. He then returned to room 065 at the highest floor. The dagger which Gu Shez gave Yi Chong as a gift had never left his body since then. He pulled out the dagger and measured the thickness in comparison to the wall. Cup. A stab into the wall. He had to admit that the noise-absorbing ability of the thermoplastic composite wall was outstanding. Not even the slightest sound was heard when he launched that dagger of his. It was rather sturdy too, considering that Yi Chong took quite a lot of effort to fully insert the dagger. The highest floor was completely off-limits, it seemed, probably a special request from the dead man, judging by how there was literally nobody else in the walkway. Fantastic. That was an additional advantage for Yi Chong's escape. Ugh. Ugh. He was slicing through the wall laboriously as he would never want to alert anyone nearby with the screeches he could possibly make if he went too fast. He maintained his speed cautiously. He could feel the hardness of the wall gradually wearing off the strength of his hand. Oh, the amount of friction on his palm. It was tough. Throughout the process, the swishes made by his dagger could be faintly heard. Yi Chong was very confident that if he were to stay farther from the wall, he would hear nothing. I swear I would never use thermoplastic composite for my walls when I build my house in future. I would be killed in my sleep before I even wake up with such security it offers. The pressure on the dagger had lifted. Yes. Yi Chong was excited. All he needed was a gentle push to the piece he cut off to the front. Wait. 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 He ran to catch the falling piece before it landed with a loud thump. The person in the room before him was still facing his back to Yi Chong. It seemed like he did not alert anyone in there. Phew. He sighed. Okay, now to the second task in the list. He walked by the fainted man. His eyes were more interested in the monitor on the table than some dead man lying on the floor. He fiddled with the settings on the monitor, trying to get something. There was no time for him to look through the directory. Time was precious. He pressed a few buttons and ejected the microchip. He slid the chip into his pocket and began frisking the slender guy on the floor. A few belongings he believed to contain the man's identity were stolen. Yi Chong rushed downstairs and hit the lobby again. This time he deleted all his involvement off the record at the self-service processor as soon as he arrived. He exited the building and warped F-58 out from the alternate dimension. He observed the lawn outside the Foundation as he plotted another round of trespassing. The Hawkeye, a model of mech specialized for reconnaissance, had a diminutive body compared to other models, of a mere length about 6 meters, coated with a unique kind of painting, which changed its color according to surroundings, allowing effective camouflage. The killer feature of the Hawkeye was the pair of antennas on its head stranding to the back, which tremendously boosts its scope of scanning and capacity of impulse receiving. It also came with an extremely powerful scanning and anti-detection system. High mobility, great speed and overwhelming length of battery life offered by its exclusive battery, though in return it had to sacrifice its durability. To fit in the battery, the armor had to be much thinner. With such lackluster thickness, one hit would finish the machine off. There was not much of possibility for it to fight back too, considering its weak firepower. Wow, this dude actually uses a reconnaissance model to watch his place? What a pimp. Mumbled Yi Chong. F-58 lurked like a jaguar on its hunt as it coveted its prey in darkness. It was undeniable that the F-58 got the upper hand in this situation. A mere training mech model it might be, it still had a more superior anti-detection system. The alarm did not go off as it moved. They were undetected the whole time. Yi Chong raised a spear. Well, a magnetic sword that sets off frequency would be bad for a sneak attack. Imagine if he were to brandish that cool sword towards one of the machines that fell prey to his assassination. Due to the reflective nature of mech armors, the frequency would be easily bounced everywhere and all mechs and aircrafts in the vicinity would immediately detect Yi Chong committing a crime there. In the next moment, before he knew it, he would be bombarded by 3 other mechs. Another session of Fast and Furious awaited. He never desired an overkill with a Hawkeye, which was blatantly a weakling in front of the mighty F-58. Its inability to even detect F-58 with its so-called advanced scanning system had already justified everything. Even a layman could tell which mech would win in the first 10 seconds. So what Yi Chong pondered about was a way to knock the Hawkeye out without being detected and giving them a chance to notify the others. Assassination. Oh, assassination, one true hobby Yi Chong adored. The passion increased the likelihood of success in the operation this time. He would get it over with by hook or by crook, as long as it would add up to the success rate of his operation. The left hand of F-58 snapped the neck of the Hawkeye while the spear in its right pierced the cabin. It was a spear with a diameter beyond 30 centimeters. Any man could be dead even by minimal contact. That pathetic armor of Hawkeye could barely hold up Yi Chong's spear as it shredded like paper upon the stab. That doesn't nail it. Yi Chong was not ending yet. He tore away the shattered armor at the cabin and he saw the murdered man inside. He felt much relieved as he stealthily placed the mech at a corner of the rooftop. Yi Chong would break his neck to assassinate. No pun intended. But it was not his, rather the other man's, and he loved it. He loved the moment when the neck snapped in his bare hand in a nice crack. It was such a strange sensation. One move and that is all it took. Nothing else would be needed. People would be dead without doing anything funny. No sound, no drama, no struggle. Straightforward, hassle-free. Okay, that's the second Hawkeye snapped. Now to the last 2 mechs at the corners. It was also a Hawkeye at one corner. Yi Chong was shocked. Wow. Did he literally set off 3 mechs specially for reconnaissance on an old man like Grandpa Shu? Most people would assume Hawkeye is another random scouting machinery, but that was not the point. Yi Chong knew it deeply. It would certainly cost an arm and a leg for a specialized mech like Hawkeye, just like how the Sand Scorpio he once used was much more expensive than the Gold Wheat despite its less pleasant look compared to the Gold Wheat to the public. And right beside the last Hawkeye was a Carl, which was notorious for its crude design, a height about 16 meters, twice as high as the F-58 and had twice the amount of parts as most of the mechs. In addition, its shield with a height of 10 meters waved like moving gigantic walls of labyrinth, suffocating indeed, not to mention how Carl wielded both of them. I wonder how people find Carl whenever they spotted one. Imagine an iron hunk of tower height shoving a giant shield each in his hands. Wild, barbaric, monstrous, savage, there was not much of a good word to describe. The firm dark green mechanical legs it had would move with a terrifying screech that gave goosebumps to anyone who heard it. It was obvious that no one would ever consider to give this colossus some anti-skid build. Its fate had been determined the day it was built with all the low-quality and dirt-cheap materials. It was born to be an enslaved fighter, the walking ashes in the warfield. The man who placed Carl and Hawkeye in a group probably just wanted Carl to be the tanker of his eyes. Oh wait, it should be the guardian of his eyes. Carl still held some values in this situation, assuming if they were attacked, Hawkeye could actually make its way out while Carl tried to buy more time holding back the intruders. Sadly, Carl's life was hardly a concern. A moving wall is a moving wall. If it crumbles, it just does. No one else would care. Yi Chong was rather impressed by the fact that the dead man could come up with such a remarkable combination to shield against possible raids. The high defense of Carl combined with the powerful scanning system of Hawkeye. The eyes and the shield in one place. Yi Chong sneaked towards the mechs. He was not expecting the hefty slow Carl to react this quickly. Carl turned his head as soon as Yi Chong started flying towards them. He instantly hid both Hawkeye and himself within the shields he raised. The 10-meter-tall shield perfectly covered up the 6-meter-tall Hawkeye. Carl did feel agitated, but the pilot did not detect any hostility from the black mech coming towards him. The speed had yet to be increased. It just traveled calmly to his direction. It looked more like a random passerby to him. Frankly speaking, he had been assuming that he was overreacting to anything coming in his sight the last few days. Those mechs he presumed to be a raider eventually just zoomed away in leisure. He did panic for numerous times at first, but as time passed, he got used to his door guard job and he lowered his guard. That shielding was out of subconsciousness. Must be overreacting again this time, he thought. I mean, who would simply dare to challenge the authority in the public? Especially when this place belonged to the G family. That's like going against God. Only fools would do it. Yeah, I have a point. He moved the shield away from Hawkeye bit by bit as he thought. Watching how sluggish the black mech flew, the pilot snickered. Only greenhorns would fly like a derp in this speed. Maybe an absolute greenhorn in flights too. As much as he assumed, the black mech then traveled clumsily towards the pilot, as if it was drunk. The pilot laughed out loud upon seeing the poor execution by that black mech. What a good chance for an extra entertainment. Today's show would be bullying the noob. He was unhappy when he was ordered to pilot the junkie Carl these few days long. Only garbage would pilot a Carl. It is like a runner-up after another runner-up in the team, a member in the lineup forever. What an insult. But he could not spit it as it was an order from the authority. He stayed quiet and piloted Carl like a moody baby. However, things had changed. Now came a greenhorn to have fun with. The black mech was inching towards Carl. Ha! That awkward movement. He almost fell a few times. The pilot felt laughter rumbling in his stomach. That was so hilarious. I just can't. He put up a look at that black mech as if he was looking at his pet. A little bit more. Wait for it, get to me and we'll play. Like and subscribe.